All right, so we are here today talking about my man Chiron because he's such a huge influence, I think, in everything that I do and everything that most of us as healers or self healers do. His spirit is always with us. And what I wanted to do was first start us off with a little attunement to him through his story. And hopefully that will connect our psyches to his. And as we move forward in our healing journeys, whether we're healing others or ourselves, we can always tap into the spirit and just the immensity of his knowledge. So if we can tap into that, we can do so many things. So first off, we're going to start with a little prayer to Chiron, which is an adapted prayer from another author. And of course, I forgot to write it down. I'll put it in. I'll put it in the course section so you can look it up later. So, hail to Chiron, shaman priest, holy philosopher, and walker between the worlds. No longer an outcast, you emerge from the shadows to claim your honorable birthright. You were born of pain and rejection, yet you've walked the spiral path of death and rebirth. Your wounds have become the gifts you offer for the healing of the world. It is you, Chiron, who opens the mouth of the goddess and activates her powers of creation. Death has no hold over her ever fertile womb, aching to give birth. You merge the dark and the light. Your longing will lead to the healing of all of our hearts and create peace in the world. You are the master lawyer who negotiates the peace between ego, spirit, and soul and body. So I want to take you back to a time a long time ago, a time that's beyond time. It's a place where life was emerging and burgeoning in all different forms and all different types of life experiences. And in that time, there were two beings who encountered each other through desire. One had desire that was untamed, and another had a desire to leave. And these two beings were Kronos and Philyra. Kronos being the master of time, Saturn himself. And through this desire, Kronos pursued Philyra. And she continued to run. And so, in order to catch her, Kronos turned himself into a horse and used the quickness of the horse's speed to take her. And in the union between the two, made from both positive and negative desire, there was a child created. But this violence of this union was imprinted on this new being. And this new being was Chiron. He was born half horse, half man. And in that time, men and gods were the same. They were the same shape. So he was half man, half horse, half god, half horse. And in this living embodiment of half god, half animal was heartbreak. His mother rejected him completely. She was terrified and devastated and repulsed by the look of her child. And in her desperation, she begged the gods to release her from being his mother. And they agreed, and they turned her into a linden tree, which has so many references that, you can look up after this class, but mainly the linden tree represents the tree of life or healing, the shamanistic tree of below with the roots and above with the leaves. And so Chiron was rejected from the moment he was born. Not only was he born in a shape that was unsightly, he was born out of violence, and his mother couldn't take the reminder of him. So she asked to be basically ended, turned into a tree. And so there's this half god, half animal being who had nobody to take care of him. And so he was imprinted from the very get-go with wounds, so many wounds, the wounds of rejection. So Apollo comes around and takes him in. And at that time, Apollo was a single man doing his thing, wise beyond belief. And so he took in Chiron and taught him the ways of wisdom. Chiron grew up in an atmosphere of the love of beauty and the love of harmony and the balance of making things right and within oneself and in the world. So he grew up infused in the love of knowledge, even though he was terribly wounded from the get-go. He began to be known as a teacher and a really wise being. And this is where Zeus came to him to be advised, and other gods and goddesses were always seeking out the wisdom of Chiron. But another wound is being shown here because Chiron was not like other centaurs. Centaurs have a reputation of being violent and passionate and destructive. They drink a lot. They just don't care about anybody else. And that wasn't Chiron. So with the one group of beings that he could have gotten along with because they were the same as him, he didn't. So he was an outcast yet again. And obviously he would get teased by other centaurs because he was the one who was the teacher's pet and daddy's little boy and, the smart one, and decided to use his passion to create rather than destruct, which is what they were doing. And being a son of a nymph, that was Philyra, she was a water nymph, and the son of time and creation itself, he was immortal, and he didn't look like one. And as he grew up, he became a teacher, and he was so well known across the lands. And as good teachers usually do, they have students come back and visit because they create that bond. And a student came back to visit, and the student was Hercules. And Hercules was one of his favorite students. And so Chiron got out the good wine for him, went into his storage and picked out the best wine he had saved from centuries before. And the smell of that wine attracted all the other centaurs who love to get drunk and destruct. And eventually a fight breaks out in Chiron's cave between Hercules and the centaurs and Chiron. And this is where the story gets muddy. There are perspectives from all three beings there. Some say Hercules was on his rampage of being a macho man at the time, and he started the fight. Some say the centaurs started the fight to steal the wine. And so what happened was Hercules had just gotten back from one of his major accomplishments that he had to do, which was to slay the Hydra. And so, as Chiron taught him, he should lace his arrows with the blood of the Hydra, because the blood of the Hydra, there is no cure for it. It is absolutely deadly with just a touch. It doesn't even, you can just be scraped by the blood of a Hydra and you will die. And so the fight breaks out, and somehow Chiron gets shot with one of the arrows. Some say Chiron was tired of the fighting and stabbed himself to stop the fighting. Some say he was caught in the crossfires. And what happened was he was caught in this crossfire and wounded with the blood of the Hydra, yet he was an immortal being. So what's to happen when an immortal being gets a mortal wound? And Hercules feels horrible that this happened. There's nothing he can really do to make it right. And the horror of the situation sets in, that this wound will be this disgusting, gaping hole, painful wound in his leg for the rest of his life. And he's immortal. So he will suffer forever. And, excuse me, what's important here is that the Hydra is a snake. And if you go back in time far enough, you will find the origins of all humanity come from the ocean. And the goddess of the ocean was a snake goddess. And you see the snake woven throughout all of time. And so her blood, which you can imagine the blood of a woman now, is powerful. And I find that very interesting that Philyra was a sea nymph, and he was wounded by the feminine, not once when he was born, but twice when he was stabbed by the arrow. All to say how important the initiations of the divine feminine are, even when they're this painful. And Hercules was stricken, devastated that he wounded his best friend and teacher. And he had no way to make it better. And so Chiron tries to adapt himself over and over, trying to use all the mental knowledge he's ever learned up until this point. And what he didn't know was the mental knowledge was only half of his journey. So he was a master at everything, but mentally. And with the two human hands that he had, he could heal with those hands. But he hadn't really realized how to travel interspace, interdimension to heal the deeper parts of him. And what's happening at the same time as all of this is Chiron is trying to heal himself. He's doing everything he can. He's learning new things. He dives so deep into and devoted to healing knowledge at this point. Because before it was all mental, and now he wants to know how to heal. So for centuries, he is digging into learning how to heal. He even tutors and fosters Asclepius, who is basically the first physician, the patron spirit of all doctors. So Chiron is the grandfather of all physicians. And they perform miracles together like this, except for healing his wound. And while all of this was happening, he's trying to find charms and plants and all these new things to fix himself. The story of Prometheus is unfolding. And without going into the entire story of Prometheus, he was the one who stole fire from the gods to give to humans. And his punishment, because it was not okay that he did that with the gods, his punishment was to be chained to a rock and have an eagle eat his liver every day and have his liver regenerate every day. And an eagle would then come and eat it again for eternity. And Prometheus would obviously not apologize because he really believed in what he was doing. He believed that fire was meant to be used as a transformative and alchemical tool. So he would never apologize. So he's stuck chained to this rock, getting an eagle eating his liver every single day. And the only way Zeus would let him out of this was if some immortal was willing to take his place. But since this was the beginning of time, everybody was having a grand old time having a life. And nobody wanted to trade places with Prometheus to get him to be unchained from this place. And eventually, to close up this circle and to find retribution for hurting his friend, Hercules goes to Zeus and pleads Chiron's case. Says, if Chiron takes Prometheus's place, can Prometheus be set free? Can the humans have the fire and transformation and alchemical tools? And Chiron will stop suffering. So this is how Hercules helps close that loop of the wound he created in the first place. And eventually Zeus agrees, and Chiron was allowed to die. He was allowed to die. And he, in a way, he was sacrificing his immortality for the good of humanity, for having fire. And fire isn't just fire. Fire is the driver of all change internally. So Chiron is allowed to die. Prometheus is set free. And Chiron's journey was not to trade immediate places, exact places with Prometheus. He didn't get chained to a rock. The place he took was to be brought into the underworld, into Hades. And that was the second half of his transformation, was to learn what it's like to dive dimensions and be a shaman. A shaman can travel from depths to sky over and over again, bringing back the healing knowledge. So this is what happened to Chiron. He died, but he transformed, and he became the ultimate shaman. He had knowledge and he had wisdom. And after 9 days, Zeus took him from the underworld and placed him in the stars. Some people say it's Sagittarius. Some people say it's Centaurus. There are two. And there is this element of feeling like he became a unicorn at that point. He was a unicorn in the sense, the physical sense, and also in the sense of what a unique life story and unique being. And he freed him from his imprisonment in the underworld. He freed the imprisonment of fire, and he is immortalized in the constellations. And so what I want you to take out of this story is that we all have that ugly wound, the undesirable feeling that we are undesirable, that we're repulsive. Even Chiron had that wound, and we all carry it. And he had no belonging. which is another wound we all carry. We all are looking to be belonged somewhere. We want to be accepted. So we carry these archetypes and we carry them and we can find them in our charts. We are Chiron. We all are Chiron. And it's with the consciousness of seeing that we are Chiron is what activates our Chiron in us. And so there's another parallel here, is that he gives up immortality. When you give up immortality, you gain choice. Because when you're immortal, you have no choice. You have to live forever. And when you decide to die, metaphorically, that's when choice is given to you. And so here's the parallel here. Choice was given to him by a snake, by a divine feminine being from the ocean. It's very similar to Adam and Eve. The snake comes, and these two beings were immortal, living this life of luxury and no worries in the Garden of Eden. And with the apple presents the choice. This is your free will. Here it is. When you eat this, yes, you will die, but you will know the depths of wisdom. So there is this overarching theme here of free will. And on one dimension, it's about physical death. And on another dimension, it's about the option of choice and how choice brings us our own immortality. Not forced immortality, but choice brings us the option to dive into other depths of our own self and recreate the rebirth pattern over and over and over again. It shows us that immortality is the bridge between life and death. It is the ultimate choice to know I get to die and I get to gestate and I get to be reborn every time. So our pain to our power, this is where we get into the actionable part of this. Our wounds and our pain is our power. It's a really hard paradox to hold because we have a victim purview on the world when we're hurt. And what this does is takes us out of victim mode and back into our power. So when we can recognize that our wounds are really where our gifts live, and our pain is where our power, our wounds are where our conscious contribution to the world is. It's where we get to go, I've been through that, I've healed that, let me help you do it now. So Chiron became a philosopher, a physician, an herbalist, a teacher, astrologer, an advisor to Zeus, sage to all the gods and goddesses. And they went to him to, like I said, receive a lot of wisdom and foresight. Out of the wounds of abandonment and rejection came this highly evolved and powerful being that all of these gods and goddesses went to visit. He became who he was out of the wounds. And we all have an abandonment rejection wound. So we have that power too. And his death represents the ultimate transformation of ego. He had to let go of who he was in physical form, who we thought we were, which is, the representation in human form of that. And the willingness to give up what he believed about himself in order to find relief. He had to give up the fact that he was immortal and every part of his immortality that created his identity. He had to be willing to give that up, trade places with Prometheus in order to find relief. And we have to do the same. We have to unidentify with our pain in order to be willing to give it up in order to find relief and therefore our power. Because in that relief, finding and doing is the power. So Chiron's story to me is the ultimate ego death, which is what we are doing every time we're healing something of our own self. Every ego death I've ever had has brought me the gift of a new secret. And I'm not here to keep secrets. Like my guides know that. I'm here to expose them. So if I get a secret, I gotta share it. That's my karma, my dharma. One of the biggest secrets to living a masterful life comes when you allow ego death to happen. And sometimes the ego deaths are so subconscious that we don't know they need dying. And that is the process of the soul diver, to constantly be going down into the depths to unearth a new thing that needs to get light. So today's question, I want you to kind of just put in the back of your head, if ego death means loss of identity, what happens when your core wound itself is your identity? When you lose your wound, who are you? Right? If we are not our pain, who are we? And that's the main reason why people don't try to heal their pain, because deep down they're more afraid to learn who they really are than they are to let go of the illusion of who they are. And more often than not, we over-identify with our pain. So whatever happened to us becomes us. And our true authenticity can never come through that, because we are too busy living inside of pain, whatever pain it was, or multiple pains. And the problem here is humans suck at loss. They suck at loss. Terrified of it. And so in the word decision in Latin, it actually means to cut. With every decision you make, there's always a loss. Always. You can't make a decision without losing one part of it. If it's a fun decision, it's cool, right? Because we're like, oh, we'll just focus on the good thing that's happening, and like whatever, the thing I lost, like whatever, I don't even remember that I lost it. So when we have a hard time making decisions in life, it's because we kind of know on a deep level that we have to cut the other out to get the thing we're deciding on. So we won't decide at all. We'll just sit here in this like, I don't know what to do thing, because we're not willing to lose the piece that we have to let fall away in order to follow the decision we want to make. We're not good at cutting. So we'll bury this loss under the rug. We'll contort ourselves into pretzels in order to not feel that loss. So like we'll try to do like a sidestep loss thing where we'll like ignore it. Be like, well, I had to make a decision and I'm not even gonna like, I'm just gonna put it behind my back and never look at it again. Cool, I'll just focus on this thing that I have to move forward with. And we never grieve that loss. We never look at it. We never acknowledge it. And it festers under that rug and becomes another wound. Whether it's a physical wound or another emotional wound or a behavior that's then creating more wounds in your life. When we lose a part of our ego, meaning one of these pain moments, we don't know how to handle the feeling of loss that came from that transformation. So you can start to see how identity is so incredibly hooked in our pain that we actually are not letting ourselves heal, because we don't want to lose that part of ourselves, because the unknown is scary and we don't know who we are without, I don't know, certainty of knowing that first. So we're just like, I'm not going to do anything now. I'm not going to make any decisions. We have a hard time comprehending that the loss will ultimately never come back. That's the reason why we hate making decisions and losing, whether it's a part of ourselves or ice cream and a pretzel. You decide the pretzel and you lose the ice cream. That ice cream will never come back in the same exact way ever again, because it'll be a new day the next time you get ice cream, and the ice cream will be different. And so if you explore this on a grander scale, when you let go of that piece of yourself, that wound, it's never going to come back in the same way ever again. You're never going to be the same. So, for example, every day the sun flies across the sky and disappears into the underworld and dies. And then the moon washes it clear and rebirths it for a new day. So that's the cycle. That day that we just had will never be the same. It will never come back. It will never be the same as yesterday. This new day will never be the same as yesterday. And that ultimately is the unconscious fear that we all have in losing bits of ourself in healing. But inherent in this loss of the sun going down and dying, you get a transformation. You get a new day. That's the cycle. So the focus is to focus on the transformation in a way where it's a positive situation, where you can then look at your grief and look at the decision you made and go, okay, like this is for my transformation. And you can't skip it. Can't skip that loss. You cannot heal without loss. So people love to spiritually bypass. They love to make things okay and love and light and all that shit, because they don't want to actually deal with the loss that is inherent in transformation. And on the inverse, you can't have transformation without the birth, death, rebirth cycle. You just can't. You must. Transformation is this cycle. It is this cycle. So if there was like a slide that says transformation, the image underneath it would be birth, death, rebirth, which is loss. That cycle is loss. This is why ego death is so difficult for so many people. But there is a secret step in the birth, death, rebirth cycle that I'm going to share with you. This is where the power lives, actually. So you've got birth. First, we'll start with birth. Forget about the re. Then we have death. And most people believe that immediately after the death, you should just be reborn and everything's better. But what most people don't ever look at or think about is the pause. There is always a form of gestation in between birth and death. There's never a jump from death back to rebirth. It's birth, death, pause. And that's the painful part for a lot of people, because it's an inactive time. So we just try to jump right to the rebirth. But in the pause lies the superpower. And the superpower comes in the non-resistance to the death and inacceptance of the loss. So if you can accept your loss, you can die and be reborn. And a lot of the times we think of superpowers as these like God-given gifts that I just like shoot out of my fingers, and all of a sudden like I know how to use the lightning bolts that shoot out of my fingers. But that's not true. All superheroes have to learn their gifts when they get them. Like if you think about any of the superhero movies, they always have to learn how to use their gifts first. And this wishing that I can just use my gifts immediately and shoot like lightning bolts out of my fingertips is a way of bypassing, because it's a way of trying to skip the uncomfortable part of learning and sitting in the pause. So the kicker is you can never acquire it. You have to consciously apply it. You can't just show up with gifts. You can't just show up and be a healer. You have to consciously apply your healing, whatever gift it is that you have. So the death is the pain and the wound. The pause is the acceptance of the pain in the wound. And the rebirth is the rising. It sounds a lot like actually the story of Jesus, right? If I go back, we've got the death, we've got the, sitting in a cave for 3 days, or, if that's a story you believe. I tend to believe a slightly different story. But that's the main story, the one that, the world believes. So he died, he was in a cave, and then he rebounded, right? He risen, he rebirthed. This is Jesus's cycle, because Jesus is a story, another allegory of the human experience. And so many of those stories are always going to be the same. This is a lot to hold. I get that, because people hate loss. But the more comfortable you get with the loss, the easier it is to do huge transformations in your life. And this is the heavy lifting of spirituality. This, to me, is what spirituality means. It's not love and light and sending crystals and oh, everything's fine. If I just think positively, everything's fine. That is bypassing the heavy lifting part of having to look at the loss you're dealing with. So acceptance doesn't work the same every time, because that's what happens in the pause. Sometimes it's sparkly. Sometimes it's in an instant. Sometimes it's a miracle. And sometimes it is rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, and an on loop of accepting. When you're healing your core wound, it means you're losing your identity, because your core wound has formulated your identity. So think that through again. When healing your core wound, you are losing your identity. Are you cool with the loss of your identity? If you're not cool with it, you will not change. You will not transform. You will not have those integrative moments, which is what healing really is integrating it. So the key to your liberty and getting free of your pain is in the acceptance of the loss of your identity. And the key to that acceptance is taking personal responsibility and going, okay, I want to transform. This is my life. I take my power back and I look at my pain, and I'm willing to lose who I thought I was in order to become somebody. Just a little bit about my story is that when I was learning how to heal, I was triggered all the fucking time. Triggered on all day. The stupidest things would trigger me. I was unsatisfied, stuck. That's generally the term everybody uses when they're having these ego death moments that they're resisting to let happen, is really they're stuck in that resistance. I was stuck in my comfort zone. I was terrified to do anything outside of my comfort zone. And because I had a massive fear of criticism, and that fear of criticism kept me holed up literally in my house with all the curtains drawn and never left. That massive fear is what I wasn't willing to really let go of. I had a lot of highs and lows, and I had a lot of highs and lows kind of at the same time. And I felt like I was two different people. I was split between my higher self and everything I knew, right? I knew all of these spiritual concepts, but I couldn't feel them. And I thought I had to just purge all the shit out of me in order to heal, instead of bringing it back in with an immense amount of love. That's what healed me. I had no reference point of purity in myself, because I had been in pain since the moment I can remember. I have been changed and altered into a person I was not since I was born. So I had no reference point of who pure Nikki was. Who, some people can remember when they were wounded, and they can go, okay, right before I was wounded, I was like this, and they have this beacon of light that helps drive them towards that thing, towards being who they really are. I had no reference point. So it was so terrified to jump into this world of the unknown, of like, who am I even if I never knew who I was in the first place? It's terrifying and it's painful. And I would always have these like airtight communications, like with people, like no holes. I would, every time I would text somebody, I would read it 4 billion times. I would make it very airtight so like they couldn't fight me or criticize me. And it was like this weird people pleaser type of thing, but also slightly like, in a way, manipulative. So like I couldn't get criticized. So I would, every communication I would have would be invulnerable, like to the nines. And if people couldn't poke holes at me, then I could stay broken, right? I would have no vulnerability. I could never apologize. I just wanted to identify with being broken. But when I integrated my main like wound identity, which is like one and the same thing, all my blocks started to go away and I stopped being stuck because I wasn't in resistance to the loss anymore. I kept my pain around as protection and I identified with it because it served me. So like, I would always be like, oh, don't yell at me. Oh, I'm so broken. Like, don't say anything to me that might hurt me more. And so I was like blocked off completely from people because nobody was allowed in. I was always burnt out and overwhelmed because this constant fear of criticism was always driving and running and running and running. My nervous system never had a break. And I was always wondering why I couldn't just get it together, why nothing ever worked. But I knew all this spiritual stuff and all this law of attraction stuff and like all of this stuff, but nothing ever worked because I was unwilling to lose my identity. I was unwilling to clear my filters, unwilling to like change my vibration and heal the shit that was within me because it kept me safe from having to not talk to people. And if I don't talk to people, then I can't be criticized. So you can start to see how all of my internal world was creating my reality. I would always introduce myself as like, not literally, but I would be like, hi, I'm pain. Like, that's what I would lead with. I've been abused, something like that, in order for almost to test people. Like, can you handle me like this? No? Okay, well, you're not worth my time. And I would just basically lead with that. I played the woundology game. Me and my pain were one, and we cannot separate because my pain is keeping me safe from people. I'm afraid and terrified of people. And that pain drove my bus and made every single decision for me. Every single fucking one. So I'm living a life built off of pain decisions and not authentic Nikki decisions. Pain was literally my only friend. My only friend. It was the only thing that has been with me since I was born. It's the only thing that's watched me grow, was pain. It's a very dysfunctional inner relationship. So I had to recognize first that I wasn't my pain. I had to move on from the death part of that cycle. I was stuck in the death part. So I was afraid to go to the pause. In order to be my fullest self, I had to leave the pain loop of the misery I know, because that's safe. And I had to change my story from nothing ever works because I'm just broken, to accepting that I could be both wounded and a badass at the same time. And it didn't have to be either or, because either or thinking is that wounded child within you. That's her thought process. If you think in either or, that is a childlike process. That's a child that's been stunted and an adult that is stuck at that age, because children think in black and white. And so when adults think in black and white, it is really a wound that's like deep within them. Nothing is either or. And so I had to recognize I didn't need to be any more healed in order to live or have a great purpose, as I was always just trying to heal myself. Trying, forcing, and nothing was working. But I knew a lot, you know? And so when I gave up the trying, I realized I could be both things at the same time. That it's almost necessary for me to continue to have this unhealable chironic wound within me and continue to live my life like a rock star. That is what reality is to be both of those things at the same time. But childlike perceptions can't hold paradoxes because it's too simplistic. Their minds are too simplistic. It's either or, black or white. But when you can hold a paradox, you have expanded yourself into a new dimension. You can hold more than either or. And so if you can hold more than being broken and know that you can be great at your life at the same time, that's where you get to learn your unique superpowers. All pain blocks flow. It blocks pleasure, creativity, business, friends, joy, stops you from receiving all of it. And your outgoing energy gets caught in the grease trap of your wound, which are these like filters that we have. And you can't even get paid back by the universe because the universe can't get through that grease trap. Your thoughts don't get out. The universe doesn't come in. You're just stuck in this loop over and over again of being alone. So what I had to do partially, and this will be just like your embodiment practice here, it's obviously not going to heal all of your wounds, but it's going to kickstart them, is to say goodbye to the pain that you've identified with ceremoniously, because ceremonies are the way to signal to the universe that you are ready. It's communication up to the divine, and like psychic hits are communication back down, for example. So this pain's kept you company for a really long time, so it deserves a good send-off. This thing has been your friend forever, or for however long you've been in pain. You've got to be nice to it when you say goodbye to it. Because so when people try to like cut their cords and all that shit, and they get big ass swords and they start cutting all their cords, they're just hatefully cutting all the shit. I know. When you can release the tension or the resistance or the conflation of terms in your head that are connected like this, that is an easy way to let go of the cords that you're cutting. When you cut them with violence, it's like a bungee cord. When you cut a bungee cord, all it does is whip right back around. It's got to be loved away. Everything has to be loved away. And if you're not good with love, you're not comfortable with love, that's where you start. Because if you're in this much pain, more than likely you have a very uncomfortable relationship with love. Probably don't know what love is. Probably don't know how to describe it for yourself. There's a lot of brokenness in love that will keep you from doing all this healing work. So a good way to start is to ceremoniously say goodbye to this pain or / identity that you have. For me, using absolute words helps. Even if it's not completely 100% true, it hits the part of my psyche that likes to speak in absolutes, the black and whites of the world. So I say things like always and never. Like when I say like, when I had a huge healing moment, I said to myself, I will always be in pain. Like this wound is unhealable. It will always be there. And it shifted something for me when I recognized that. It doesn't mean that wound has to run your life anymore. It means that you can actually compartmentalize it now inside a backpack and carry it with you instead of letting it live your life for you. So always and never, try to use those words to help acceptance flow. So my wound releasing ceremony looks like this. You can copy this, make it whatever you want. I use a lot of symbolism, and that helps me have those communications with the divine. But if you have like more witchier things you like to do, whatever, just you do what you need to do in this wound releasing ceremony to communicate the fact that you're ready to let go of your identity. So for me, I set the stage. I get candles. I get candles in colors that make me feel like I'm gonna, like for me, like this one may be a pink candle moment because you really need to love this away. You need to love this wound away, but that's just me. I take Epsom salt baths because that to me clears my energy. Pink and green crystals for the heart. So green for healing is associated with the heart as well as pink. And I get essential oils made from flowers, not like a root oil or a leaf oil. This is flower moments because flowers are for the emotions. And as Chiron would have us do, since he is the ultimate herbalist, he would have us use essential oils in our healing because they shift energy within us, because the oil itself is light energy. Mirrors are important here, and they're very uncomfortable, but they're important. So I hold a mirror to myself to keep myself accountable and to take responsibility, because if I'm looking at myself, I can't kind of ignore that it's for me. If I don't use a mirror, I can kind of just go, oh, I'm going to heal so that I can heal other people. And I come up with all these other people reasons why I need to heal. But with a mirror, no, it's for me. And this is my responsibility. I'm taking responsibility for the amount of control this pain has had over my life. Fuck that. No more. Right? It's like breaking up with a boyfriend that you kind of love still. You're like, you don't want to hurt him too bad, but you also need to be real firm because he's like not leaving. It's one of those kinds of love moments, right? And so I will anoint myself with this flower essence, whichever one picks you really. But I really like Artemisia. It's also called Divana. Artemisia is, oh, she's right here actually. It's Diana. It's the goddess of the moon. And she is Artemis. Artemis Diana. Super good for healing. She's also one with the arrows. So there's a lot of this Chiron, the feminine type of Chiron, where like it's Artemis. She has arrows. She's like Chiron, but it's more loving. Because that's what we need right now, is the unconditional love to be flowing through this. So I anoint myself, I put it on my heart. I inhale it deep into my lungs because that's where the grief lives, in the lungs. So this is a very important aspect of this, is the anointing and the breathing. It's all for this section of your body. Lungs, heart, breasts, all of that. And then I put it on my crown to seal it in too. It's just my thing. And I accept that I've been wounded and that I am not my pain. And when I say pain, I also mean identity. I accept I've been wounded and I get to be a badass at the same time. Not one and the same. They are different things that I hold at the same time. And then I write a nice breakup letter to my pain. Breaking up with this cycle. Knowing it'll still be in the backpack I carry, but it's not going to be driving my bus. I'm not going to be living inside of it. I'm breaking up with the cycle of it. And like, just like a good ex-boyfriend, you kind of put the scrapbook you made like in the closet, and you have it still, but like, it's not out in the open and it's not controlling you. You just like visit it every now and then. So for you, the action item here is to write this letter, and I can share with you my sample letter. I'll read it real quick. Probably won't read the whole thing, but basically, so you get the gist, it's like, wow, it's been a long time. I didn't even know you existed really, because you and I were the same thing. As time went on, I acknowledged you existed and then never wanted to let you go. I forced you to be friends with me since you were the only one who ever witnessed my wounds and the people who wounded me. We were pals. We did everything together. I even let you drive. It was so nice to be driven around all the time. But now I have to take responsibility and drive myself. I let you take care of everything. You became me. We were one. And I would say, hi, my name is Pain, everywhere I went. Over time, I learned people will treat me with kid gloves because of my wound. We can make people not come near us like this. They'll never criticize us if they can't come near me. And I couldn't handle it. So cool, we'll just let them stay far away and I'll be isolated. And never had to be pushed out of my comfort zone because I just hid behind my pain. What a life. We were untouchable. We were so isolated. Nobody could reach us for good or bad. But then I started to get frustrated. Why was this not working for me? Why was I always sad? Why was I always isolated and alone? When was this pain going to end and my world get bigger? And then it hit me. If I am one with pain, of course it will always be with me. I'll never be free as long as you're driving and I live inside of you. I know I cannot change my past and I'll always have a wound, but now it's time for you to walk to the side of me, not deal with the world for me. We need to separate now. I love you and thank you immensely for keeping me safe this whole time and keeping me comfortable and keeping me company. I'll always remember you, because trust me, here, forget it. And now it's time to work together toward a common goal. My destiny is the common goal here. It's time for me to be in the world as Nikki and not Pain. It's time to show up. It's time to be seen. It's time to deal with the in-between. And with this letter, I hereby announce to the immediate separation of Nikki and Pain. To integrate you, I must separate you from the loop. If you are always looping and we are always looping, I cannot be separate from that. So we need to integrate in order to be separate. It's the ultimate paradox. So from here on out, I declare us separate. I will be driving now. And I release you from the responsibility because it's mine to hold. Yours. So that was my little cheeky way to symbolize that I'm breaking up with, my shitty identity, the one that's and the pain other people have caused me. Like, why am I holding on to shit other people have caused me? Fuck that, take it back. And walk with the wounds that give you the wisdom. Take the wisdom and give back the shit. Let that was their shit anyway. People who have wounded you, it's always their shit that wounds you. So take it back. And that, I think I will stop my Chiron chat. The Chiron can go on forever and ever and ever. There are books and books and books on Chiron. But that is how he lives in my life. So thank you. Hi.
Hello.
How you doing? Sorry, that went kind of long.
No, it's good. One of the things that popped up in my head is, what does it mean to accept loss?
For you, we will deeply get into that in Alchemize Your Vibe. Like deeply.
Okay.
Like acceptance is the ultimate alchemizer. But I put it toward it's in the middle of the course, but it's at the end of the healing part, because it is when you do it without all the other things, it's just like I said yesterday with forgiveness, it doesn't stick. It ends up being bypassed in some way, shape, or form. But to accept the loss of your identity. So the loss that your pain has created within you, the identity that the pain has created within you, you have to be willing to lose that. It doesn't mean that it definitely goes away. It's the willingness to lose it is the key.
Mm-hmm.
To be willing to give up everything you thought you were in order to be the thing your destiny, basically, the thing you're meant to be. And for most people, it's just a different flavor of who you are now. It's not like light and day different, night and day different. I said that. Most people tell me after they've gone through Alchemize Your Vibe or some other sort of healing thing I've done with them, they're exactly the same, but completely different at the end. So like their life is still kind of the same, but everything that they've held is completely different. So their world is technically different. And I think that is, it's the willingness to let that go, let go of the safety of knowing who you are and allowing who you're meant to be to take that place. Does that answer your question?
I mean, yes, but no, because I think that when the question popped into my head, it was in a different context. Because talking, no, it's fine. You're talking about ego. I think that what I was talking about, because like when you were talking about the acceptance and the grief and all that sort of stuff, losing my dogs is what came up. The acceptance of that pain, the acceptance of that grief, and letting that go and accepting that, and then the responsibility part, because I had to choose to let them go. So there's guilt, and then there's remorse, and then there's pain, and then there's loneliness, all this shit. So I think that's more so where my question was coming from, and it doesn't have any context here. So
yeah, to me there's a difference in process between complex trauma and event trauma.
mm-hmm.
And in my head, how I bucket these out are like the complex trauma is the trauma we've gone through every single time day of our life growing up. And then, losing our animals is traumatic, and it is within a certain time frame that it happens. And it's not happening because of a wound that we're deciding other factors from. It's literally making that decision and being okay with the loss of it. It's as much as this sounds insensitive, because I know it's not, it's just a simpler process, even though it's incredibly awful and hard and gut wrenching. But you're right, though. You're right. It's the acceptance of the loss of the animal and the grief that comes with it, and all of the grief emotions that come with it. It is like its own world, own ball of wax of this losing people or animals or loved ones versus the process that happens inside of us as our own identity. It's almost invisible, because the death of a person or an animal or a loved one is out there, and you can witness it and you can see it. You are already separate from it. And the one that happens inside of us is so mishmashed into the same thing. It's really hard to alchemize, because alchemy means you're taking out separate pieces and purifying those things and putting them back together. So it's like slightly more complicated in a way, even though it's not as outwardly painful sometimes as it is like losing a dog.
Yeah.
Chiron, man. It's like I want to hate him, because you're just like, dude, what the fuck? Like, what is this? Like, how much shit can you like represent and then pass on to humanity at the same time? And then on the other hand, I'm like, wow, like that's so powerful. I'm like in awe by it, It's just strange, like paradox to hold in that way.
Yeah.
And
then hearing his story and reflecting on humans that seem to share that same type of shit after shit after shit after sacrifice after I'm okay after shit after I still love you and I after shit, like I'm fucking married to one. So
Yep. It is so representative. And the fact that like the Hydra's blood is what puts him under. Like, she is the underworld. The ocean goddess is the underworld, and her blood, her blood that grew him from, you know, the womb, is what sends him back into the underworld. It's incredible. Like, when you start looking at all this symbolism, because people love to they love to demonize the Hydra, because Hercules had to slay the Hydra. But they skip over the whole fact that the Hydra's blood killed him or sent him back into the underworld. That's the whole fucking point of the story, is that the woman, the divine feminine, was actually the catalyst to making him a time traveler, to making him a depth diver and a shaman. She did it. And it wasn't out of malice. Like, and that's the other, you know, like, we demonize her because she's dangerous and she's a snake in the ocean. She's dangerous because she will initiate the fuck out of you, but for your betterment, you know? That's what that gets me about just the world in general and how they demonize women, because the power is there. Yeah.
I was just going to say that it feels very patriarchal in the conditioning of that archetype, because, like, even with Vesta in the Roman mythology, Vesta is very different than the Greek mythology.
Yeah. Yep. Definitely. The Vesta and the Virgin, just Virgin in general, is like miscalculated so many ways. It's silly.
That's a whole different talk, though. So.
Oh my god, maybe that'll be my next one.
I'm obsessed.
Is it Vesta season in January, maybe?
I have no idea. I'm obsessed with Vesta because it's in this huge stellium I have in my sixth house. So I'm super, and it's right there conjunct my vertex.
Oh, you know what that dawned on me is that's in your sixth house, you said, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in recent times, because Chiron, you know, is recent, Chiron is a ruler of the sixth house. It's a ruler of Virgo. So there's probably a lot of your own personal death, rebirth, identity situation happening in that stellium with Vesta.
Mm-hmm. They've also been contemplating making Vesta a co-ruler of Virgo.
Interesting. Yeah, well, that makes sense to me. She's a virgin. Yeah. Yep. Interesting. All right. I'm going to sign off. Get ready for later.
Alrighty.
Thank you for hanging out, though. Appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. I love it.
All right. See you later.
All right. See ya. Bye.